You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from IVOXY Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt Yette 7.0 Advanced Plus.
Enterprise Advanced Plus.
Enterprise Advanced Plus 2.0.7. And alongside me is my co-host, Mr. Matt Cozzolino.
And I'm going to go with like version 0.07 now. So.
Are you still in beta?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think I'm a perpetual beta.
If you're in perpetual beta, nobody can complain because you can say, what? It's a beta. It's a beta.
Come on, what do you expect? Still figuring this out. Come on.
Whoa.
I almost slipped there, see?
The sensors almost caught you. We're going to have a wardrobe malfunction on Data Center Therapy. Yeah.
So can I be the update 3 guy then?
Well, please take it from us. Yes. So we do have a leaner, meaner, and more advanced version of us joining us today. I think this is, you've been on before, Shane, but it's been a little bit of a while since, right?
Yeah, it has been. This is like my 3rd podcast, I think. So it's been a number of months.
We've had a bit of a streak where we've had a handful of episodes now with fellow IVOXY consultants on with Matt and I, and I'm liking it. I mean, don't get me wrong, we don't want to necessarily talk hardcore shop with every single episode, but at the same time, I got tired of when Cozzolino said, let's talk about fidget spinners for one episode. I said, enough's enough.
I don't think I talked about fidget spinners. Come on, man. They're high-quality ball bearings.
I think I said we need to get back on track here. So, Shane, it's really great to have you. And if you are unfamiliar with Shane, Mr. Shane Bradley hails from Canada originally and has been with us for, not over 3 years, right?
Be 3 years, June 1st.
Yep.
Wow.
How about that? How about that?
Yeah. Loving every day.
And so that puts us at June 19, BC effectively. It's basically 1 BC. So you think about the last 2 years, and that sometimes can really get compressed. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been simultaneously the quickest and longest 2 years, I think, of a lot of people's lives. And
at the same time, actually, yeah.
At the same time, it's been really weird, yeah. But it's really awesome to have you back, Shane.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we've got some updates with Shane, and some people hearing his voice might also associate it with hearing the voice of their instructor if they've taken a previous VMware vSphere class, right?
Yes.
So what do you got in store for us? What's coming up?
Well, we are building on our previous introduction to vSphere class, so we're truly getting into a bit more of an advanced class and advanced topics. And that's really what we're bringing to the masses here pretty soon. We're just in the process of building out the class. It should be ready within the next month and a half. And we're going to get at her.
Yeah. So, Shane, I had a question for you. I know for me and Yette and I guess a bunch of the other engineers, we are in VMware a long time. So as we're asking these questions about, helping you put together the class and you're soliciting feedback from us.
Soliciting? And building your strategy?
Yeah. I don't know. Words have been hard this last week.
Hey, man, it's a Tuesday. We could be excused.
Yeah.
What are you finding that's advanced? Because I know there's some things that I feel like, well, that's just what we do, but in the weeds of iSCSI and configuration there is actually advanced to some people. So what have you come up with for that? What are some of the topics?
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think, most people can grab the ESXi ISO and install ESX and do the same thing with vSphere.
Right?
Yep, absolutely. And you can get your environment up and running, and things might be working, but what are you doing to make it better for the company as well as for yourself in terms of learning? So one of the big things I want to focus on, because I've been doing VMware a long time, and I look at it now, and us as consultants, we go into a customer site, and the first thing that our brains really do is look at how was this built. So I want to focus a bit on the architecture and the concepts really that people should be looking at to implement best practices, redundancy, all those kind of things that we look at and we go, they should be here, but potentially sometimes they're not. So architecture is one of the big things that I want to focus on in this advanced class. Let's face it, security is another one that everybody has to be looking at now. So, what do you need to do to kind of lock that environment down a bit more to protect yourself from, the bad actors out there in the world?
Okay. I feel like the one I run into the most is the networking, and how do you plumb this thing into the network and get it connected back up? Is that something you're going to cover in a couple of different fashions?
Definitely going to touch on the network and storage pieces. We kind of went into the network probably more than I think what an intro class should be. So I'm happy to kind of go over some of that. But one of the things that we don't want to do with this advanced class is, regurgitate any kind of material. So I am taking a strong look at what did we cover in our intro class, because we did go into the distributed switch. And, the distributed switch is probably more of an advanced topic.
I would agree, yep.
Yep. So going to be selective in terms of, are we going to rehash that and regurgitate it? I don't want to. So I am taking a hard look at that for sure, Matt.
Cool.
It's funny with the DV switch. It is something that, like you said, Shane, is advanced, and I think even ourselves, we're guilty of it. A lot of times it is put in, and yet then it's forgotten about, right? It's an advanced, completely different concept of networking for your ESXi servers and how they are assigned interfaces for their own stuff and how port groups are doled out for VMs. But I think past that, a lot of times we don't go even further. There's QoS and things of that nature. And how it affects your design and when you have resiliency in mind is also something that you have to pay a little more attention to. There's a lot there, and even these technologies that have been around and features that have been around since earlier versions of vSphere, they're constantly tweaking them. And oftentimes the behavior can completely change. A lot of times they'll rip up and rewrite the logic and algorithms on a lot of these functions too. And I think that gives a chance to revisit and refresh and refamiliarize and say, am I really using this for the right reasons? But it's also a pitfall. The old adage with software, right? It's like, this thing's been working for 4 versions rock solid. Why did you touch it?
Yep.
Why did this break?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me want to hit my head against the desk at times, but that's the world we live in, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yep.
Have either of you seen virtual volumes in the wild, like actually in use in the wild?
Great question.
Is it still one of those ones that, like, we talk about it and we don't actually see anyone? Because I know I haven't. I want to, I think, but...
Yeah, so IVOXY does have one customer, which will be unnamed, but they did do the migration from RDMs to virtual volumes.
Okay.
And the big use case for them was Windows clustered services, as well as database use as well.
I love your answer to that, Shane, because you went right to the question that I ask if someone says, well, what about vVol? What's your use case?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What's your problem? And some of my customers, and this was me a lot of time before I was an IVOXY employee, because it's a feature, it's a button, and I want to press it. And I can absolutely get behind that, except I can encourage and understand the attitude, but ultimately, when you're in a production environment, the leeway to experiment and play around and try it just because I might want to say, hey, look, pump the brakes a little bit, or do you really need to do this? But yeah, vVols seems to keep popping up in terms of, well, for me, it felt like a reaction to the industry, where vSAN was a reaction to, hyperconverged, right? It was VMware kind of doing it natively. I think vVol was, and Shane, you might be able to speak to this. I think vVol was somewhat of an answer to Tintri, and how they kind of, it's not the same thing, but it feels like the one single data store, but then each VM you could see that information on a per VM basis, even though you're on a flat single NFS data store. I think Tintri kind of started pushing things in that direction.
Yeah, I could definitely see where you're going with that for sure. It does make sense from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my takeaway was like the volume portability concept. Like, here's this disk, and it's not in a specific VMware format; it's in an OS format, kind of a thing.
I guess from a Tintri standpoint, I'm looking at it as a volume visibility.
Yeah.
And certainly not the same functions at all, but I just feel like this is VMware taking that concept, like, oh, it used to be this big bucket, and that's that. We're gonna be able to divvy up now and take it to the next level. So, like you said, that portability. And yet here we are. Shane's talking about his one customer he knows of. I'm sure there are more than one, but maybe not more than a handful.
Yeah. Yeah, they went to the main root use case of what I think vVols was kind of out there for.
I think that's what we get blindsided with, especially in the consulting seat. I think that's a thing we run into, because all of our vendors are coming to us saying, hey, here's this cool new thing. It's super awesome, super neat. This is what we're super hot to trot about. And we have to kind of wade through that and distill it. Yep. And I want to sit there and go, wow, that's really cool, but like, what am I solving with it? What am I doing?
That's my thing. You can whiteboard the tech, and I will fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I don't appreciate that, not that I don't absorb that, but internally. But ultimately, I have to talk to my customers about where it applies, and that's how I operate too. It's like, Coz, you and I have had this battle over Docker, right, on previous podcasts in terms of Docker in the home lab. In my opinion, very difficult argument for the pro, in that I'm not redeploying my home lab ever. I'm not. If I have a disaster, I've had a bad day, and I've got a few bad days ahead of me. It's not Docker to the rescue. And now you take a different tack, and that's fine. But I think if we see what the use case is, for me at least, the tech underneath more easily falls into place. Mm-hmm. Also, I almost work backwards from what's the actual solution, the applicable scenario, and I can work backwards and understand the bits of tech from that point. Going the other direction, bits of tech, you'll lose me by the time you get to the lead, effectively.
Bury the lead, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, and this goes exactly to what I want to almost start the advanced class on, is with the architecture concepts and stuff, is, how are you building this? Why are you building it this way?
Or this is somewhat of a final state, or these are the things we want to achieve. Now let's see how we get there, and why it's important to understand, and the pitfalls that you want to avoid along that journey.
Decisions we're making.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I might be guilty of taking that a little too far and saying, hey, so you're Mr. Customer, you've got 4, 5, 6 ESX hosts. If we needed to scale this up to a dozen or 2 dozen, we'd need to have these things in place to be able to do that, and maybe the likelihood of being able to needing to do that is not necessarily there. But I like to answer that question and at least have that thought.
I notice that about you, Matt. Like I tell our common friends and people who, when you come up in conversation, and that this is a guy who loves to teach and show. This is a guy who when he's talking about what he just worked on, replacing his well pump, what does he do? He says, can we jump on a Zoom? And he pulls up a drawing of his house and an infrastructure diagram of where his trench is dug. I'm like, are you okay? Like, that's great. I would never go to those lengths. And that's what I really like about you, in that when I was at an older job, I'm going to call out a friend of mine, Ed Hildreth, one of my great friends, former colleague when I lived in New York. And I remember when I was introduced to him at the job that I met him at, someone said, this is Ed. Ask him what time it is. He'll paint you a picture of a clock. And it's not that you're super verbose, Matt, but when you're explaining something, you go in that direction. Yeah. I would say the same about you.
Yeah. Well, Coz, there's nothing wrong with you. I'll say that right now, because I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I don't care if a customer has 2 hosts. I want to look at building their environment out that they could miraculously grow and somewhere down the line need 200 hosts. I still want to build it that same way so it does scale with a lot more ease than having to do a rework.
And I think I'm going to split the difference on that, in that I don't disagree with any of what you two are saying at all. And I would also say that a good design means that you can scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also going to go down the fact that I don't necessarily like to explore the academia of it for academia's sake. We're there to do a job. We're there to educate. Yes. But if you're going, let's say you have tasks, and I'm just nice round numbers, and you have a day to do those tasks, and you accomplish those tasks, and the customer is educated and informed and empowered to take advantage of all that. But you also said, let's make it so you can scale to 1 million nodes or whatever. Something that is absolutely not practical, will never in a million years happen. But you spend another day doing that. It's time spent value proposition for me, in terms of, I would say, yeah, that's all great, but don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. And that does not mean
weird to
sloppy.
hear you say that.
That's not, well, that's not, I'm a big good, well, you should come check out my...
You want automatic, auto driving to be 100% perfect. That's what
I want perfect with good enough effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I get exactly where you're coming from that point too, Matt. So,
well, I would just when we're in our huddles and we break it down and we say, hey, what are we trying to accomplish? What is really the goal here? And yeah, Shane, that's wonderful, but what are you slacking off on to go overboard on this work? And I'm not talking about you personally, just overall. That concept is that you can overbuild or you can overthink. Brass tacks, let's make sure the time is used efficiently. So, but at the same time, that academic exercise is super important, because how do we learn?
Yep. I think,
what about this?
One of the ones I see you've got on here, Shane, for us is something you're going to talk about in class, and I'm kind of trying to tee you up for it, is some of these design sessions and some of these questions can be beneficial for more than just the customer, but actually the person as well. So you might be working somewhere where they only need 3 hosts, but then you, Mr. Customer, get a new job. And now you've got 30 hosts.
Yep.
Now you've got 2 data centers. And we've already touched on this concept. And I know VMware's got some stuff, some recommendations around that. So you've got something else you're going to bring into class as a concept to talk about, Shane?
In what way, Matt? Sorry.
I think that's the VMware validated designs.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So I think from that point of view, it's valuable that people know exactly what's supported, what isn't, and that's where the validated designs come in. They're always worth kind of looking at and making sure that, you're not going to phone up VMware and say, I got this problem, and they're going, you built it wrong. We don't want to see that, right? And then that's going to cause some rework. So we definitely want to touch on those just to make people aware of them, because as you said, it really is, the class isn't just there to help the business. It's there to help you grow your career, and that's really one of the things that I love about the teaching aspect. I'm old enough in IT now. I've been in it for 20 some years, and I'm not at the point where it's kind of like I'm going to keep this to myself. I want everything in my brain to kind of spew out and help people learn. That's where I'm at, and I love it.
I like what you were saying, Coz, in terms of you may have a job today where you're managing 3 hosts.
Yep.
But you might jump. It reminded me of the concept of dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have. In that, always be enriching yourself to be able to take on more in the next step.
Yep.
And it's good for me to even hear that, because I think we all need to.
Last place, we deployed our new set of hosts, and we planned for doing this and that and the other thing. We never got there, but I've gone through that exercise, and now I can step into it. And,
But I also love the fact that this lab that we've built has forced me to learn new technologies too, because again, Terraform sounds great, but I don't have a cloud deployment, Matt Yette personal life kind of thing. I just don't. And doing it for the exercise won't push me to do it. doing it because, I could run this and get it stood up really cool and learn about this tech in the process. The lab has really, like Terraform, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Terraform's been a revelation. It's super powerful, super complex, super still beta-y, right, man? I know they've got 1.0 out now, so all of that. But
did we get there?
ultimately, we were on the early tails of that. We were like the .11 or something like that.
I know there was some revisions where I'm like, come on, next release, because it's got one feature that we want.
Yeah, and it was developing that quick too, where you could realistically hope for it to work.
Yep.
But yeah, so yeah, Shane, this is cool that you're going to be diving into security concepts a little deeper, because I think all in all, there's no sense in managing something that you can't secure, and I think nowadays that's probably top of mind no matter what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you look at it, for the most part, can you say that vSphere is secure out of the box? It does have some security out of the box, but can you take it a bit further, right? When you look at something like the security configuration guide, recommendations are limit access to the VM console. Copy and paste, don't allow that, which is kind of the default today. So don't open it up, please. Those kind of things. But not only that, but taking, RBAC and roles and permissions to a next level, where not everybody in your environment is an administrator and shouldn't be an administrator, but folder use is awesome for locking that stuff down. And there's a lot of sites. I don't know about you guys when you look at a customer site, but I don't see a lot of customers using folders to kind of secure their environment as much as they maybe should.
I think I see more organization and less security out of it.
100%. I've never seen them being used for that purpose.
Yeah. I've seen people using resource pools as a means to do it, and that's not what they're meant for, right?
That's a whole conversation.
That is a different conversation. I've really taken to putting a lot of the timeouts on it, like, how long will I leave a SSH session running, or how long will I leave it open before I have to log in? So those are kind of things that I've really adopted, even in my own home lab. I could leave it wide open, but I lock it down, right? And it's just a good practice to get into from that perspective. So,
does anybody know if through Shodan there are any vCenter interfaces exposed over the internet, which has always astonished me?
Positive that there is.
Because when I first think of ESX vulnerabilities, right, I'm like, well, what? Who puts their ESX on a? So on a routable VLAN, but a lot. But ultimately, we're also getting to the point where, in a deeper discussion, we might be talking about out-of-band management for everything, and so that means that fancy rubric that does data and management over the same VLAN, you'll want to split that out and have the data side hang off on a non-routable network. Requires more work, but then you have multi-factor just to get on that network, or a jump box, right? That is heavily locked down, because all you have to do is get on that network and then east-west, and
there you are.
And without microsegmentation, of course, which we have a lot to talk about there too. If anybody
that's a whole different ball
wants
of
to
wax.
explore that,
Management has to get there.
Yep.
You know what I'm holding out for is like a native Let's Encrypt client on vCenter/ESX. I think that sounds wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Certificates alone. KPI
basically, an easier way to get the certificates, the signed certificates.
Or PKI, I should say. Yeah. You're preaching to the choir, probably, on that one. Yeah.
I would probably say some VM concepts, or vCenter concepts, I guess, that we kind of want to cover in the class as well. We touch on them briefly, but a lot of people don't use them, and that's host profiles. And I've seemed to have liked them. It actually saved my bacon really good at one project, probably within the last 2-3 months. Went into the customer site, went to help them, and they had some staffing changeover, and the ESXi host password for root was not known at that point. So I was doing the upgrade, and it was like, okay, so we need this, and they're like, well, we don't know how to get it. And lo and behold, host profiles, if you have the licensing for Enterprise Plus, you can actually reset that ESXi root password without a reboot, and that came in really handy.
So it's encrypted, but it's stored within within the host profile.
Yep, absolutely. So
I forget about the licensing piece, but I think that's the only way you can do it, right?
yeah,
Unless
either
you've got the original password.
well, the other way you could probably get around it, and I'm not advocating for this by any means of the imagination, is evaluation mode is still going to let you do it. So
Okay.
if you have those remaining days, you could probably emergency use do it. Because you look at VMware's documentation, short of that, you're going to have to rebuild the host, right? And that's not always an option. So,
Well, speaking of rebuilding hosts, we're having to do that a bit in a way lately, and I know we've talked about this, but the deprecation of a non-persistent storage for your ESXi installs, and everybody and their mom has SD cards and USB drives, which was easy peasy, cheap, and it worked. Now VMware, my guess is, it's not that ESXi needs to have, in my opinion, I don't feel like they need to have persistent storage. You know, with the fact that you've always been able to plumb up a syslog to a remote share or on a mounted iSCSI or NFS data store or syslog server, you know, there's scratch partitions and all of that working space. Again, you can use your storage for that, and then, you know, maybe if you have a, you know, like a core dump or something, yes, there's ways that you'll miss that, right, if you're using mounted storage. But ultimately, my guess is and there's a lot of reasons, I'm sure, but I think it was they're tired of getting calls. And they're like, oh, what's wrong with my vSphere? Well, it's not vSphere. It's the fact you installed it on that $6 USB drive that you found in the parking lot one day, and you decided to throw it into one of your servers. They're just cheap, right? But there is no real graceful way, I think, to replace this. So, okay, you've got 8 servers, and they're all using USB thumb drives or SD cards. You have ESX on it. Just had a colleague of ours, Ryan, he just went and installed and did this project. Ultimately, it is you export to an XML file your ESX at the command line. It's kind of like host profiles, but at the command line. So you get that file, you save it off, and then you effectively do what you need to do from a hardware standpoint in the server. Install the new drives, get your RAID set built, RAID card, whatever. And then you have to reinstall ESXi, and then and it needs to be the exact version that you exported from, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right.
And that's tough to do.
I think that's where those host profiles make it a little easier, though.
Well, how do you? So would you say you still have to destroy the host and then reinstall it? And I think it's 6.5 done the other at that point with the profile. Right now, at the host profile, do you know if that would cause a problem, Shane? If you tried, if it's different hardware, I mean, the host profile is going to expect it's going to be on a different.
So that's, in my
install?
experience, that's the thing that's cool about the host profile is you can pull out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So you'd pull out the location of the install?
Yeah, all of that
Okay.
random stuff, and just like, here's my couple of VM kernel interfaces that I want. Here's the switch that I want. Here's this.
In this case, we wanted everything, so it was really just an XML file. But at the same time, I love that too, because there's more than one way to skin a cat, and chances are, if I'm doing something one way, Cozzolino, you're doing it the other way.
Probably.
I think that's a
just
rule.
because you did
wake
it
up in the morning.
the one way, and I have to.
Yette got up on the left side of the bed. I'm going to get up on my right side of my bed today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with Coz on that point too. The host profiles, you should be able to export them and make them portable somewhere else, so they are a bit more flexible.
Yeah. Do they? Can you pull them somewhere, or they're within vCenter? You can now.
Yeah, you can move them. Yeah.
That's cool.
Or copy them and move them somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's best practice too to use native backup when necessary. So again, let's think of Rubrik, and yes, you're protecting your vCenter server, but let's say you have to rebuild that. I mean, vCenter server itself has its own backup. Mm-hmm. And it has the ability to store it on an FTP server or something. I think it's very important to leverage that as well, because again, there are all kinds of different disasters, and maybe you don't want to whole hog the whole VM. You just need to roll back the config, and I don't want to have to re-image the entire VM or restore the entire VM image to get there too. So those are things that should be checked on deployment as well. And do you have a centralized TFTP server that you then protect with your backup solution? It should be probably a question that we ask more often, and that goes for networking equipment as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's one that kind of thing's something I do now with NSX, because the recommendation is there's a checkbox. Anytime there's a config change made, run a backup, and it's hitting an SFTP server. So that's a good thing to do. Keep those backups.
So, Shane, I notice here you're going to be talking about the managed object browser as well.
Yes.
So we've all jumped into there from time and again, and I usually use it to rip out plugins that are just refuse to come out, right?
That's the main use I've seen for the managed object browser before. But it is a lot more powerful than that. You and I kind of had spoken about it, recently, in that if you use it wrong, you can really blow up your environment. Which isn't obviously a good use case. I liken the mob to using ADSI edit in Active Directory. It's not the tool that you go to first, but it's definitely there for a specific purpose.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how you dive into that, because that, like you said, it is super powerful. It's basically the registry of vCenter.
Yeah,
I guess you could call it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It should be interesting. Yeah. I like it. I like the focus on security for a portion of the class. I think that's absolutely necessary. Yeah.
Yep.
So, do you have any idea when we're going to be kicking off this class?
So I think we're initially scheduled for June 6th is our first class. So it'll all depend on the open enrollment and how many people want to take the class right away and that kind of thing. But I am more than happy to speak to anybody out there, about what you're going to learn, and go over any topics that you think you might need, and if we're going to cover them in the class as well. So either reach out, to your IVOXY account manager, or you can ping me directly to my email, shane@ivoxy.com. Nothing hidden there. It's out in the world, so I'm happy to talk about the class anytime anybody wants to.
Nice.
Awesome. Kaz, do you have anything that you wanted to check up with Shane and quiz him on before we let him go back to his day?
No, I think we covered everything I had as a thought. So
yeah. Shane, we're looking forward to this, man. And if you want to, if you want to get in on this, definitely reach out to your account manager, or email us podcast@ivoxy.com too. We'll get to the relevant parties. If you hey, I don't have an account manager, but let me in. I want to learn more about this. But I think I want to say that Shane was the one who really took the bull by the horns and put his hand up and said, "Hey, new lab, we need to get the ball rolling with our training." And we've always done training at IVOXY, but I would say, admittedly, 4 or 5 years ago, there's a bit of a lull where there's a little bit of attrition in the depth of classes that we offered. So Shane put his hand up and said, "I will reboot the server and I will run with it." And he kind of went out there on that limb with the vSphere 6.7 classes and really crushed it. So a lot of people ask, should I upgrade to 7, this and that? I mean, the ultimate answer is, at some point you have to, because VMware is becoming very aggressive with deprecating older versions and wanting to get along the way. But it's something where, technology marches on and advances, and it behooves you to familiarize yourself, right, with what's new. So, yeah, Shane, thank you on behalf of everybody at IVOXY. I mean, and our customers. We really appreciate you being willing to go out there and push these educational opportunities forward.
Absolutely, man. I'm here to do it, and that's what I like doing. So
awesome. All right. Well, I think that's about it for this episode of Data Center Therapy. Shane, thanks again for joining us. And Mr. Cozzolino, it's always good to chat with you and your red microphone. What do you want to call it? Pop filter as well.
I'm going to draw a smiley face on that just for you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to Data Center Therapy. Have a good one, all.
All right. Bye-bye.